When you're building a gaming PC into a Corsair case, in this instance a 5000D Airflow, Corsair gives you loads of information about the installation of your motherboard assembly, the power supply, your graphics card and the choice of cooling. They will also talk about the RGB in their fans. The 3 fans at the front of this case have a RGB and it looks absolutely lovely. A point they tend to gloss over is the hardware that drives the RGB lighting. Now you'll note we have a cover on this 5000D, and behind that cover we have all sorts of hardware which is associated with the RGB lighting. It's an absolute eyesore. However, Corsair is well aware of this issue. They have a solution which we saw on the down low at CES 2023 and which was officially launched at Computex 2023. That answer is iCUE Link. This kit of fans includes the iCUE Link controller and it's going to replace all of this hardware. I've seen Corsair's demos and now it's time for me to try iCUE Link for myself. Let us take a look at what iCUE Link is attempting to fix. So here we have most of a PC. We haven't yet got to the CPU cooler. I've removed a number of panels from the 5000D Airflow. These two come out of the side. I'm not intending putting a cooler or fans in the side position, although clearly I could. I'm intending just to allow the sides to breathe through this mesh portion of the right hand side panel. So we're just going to have this for airflow. The cooler can go in the roof. I've swapped out this front panel here for this because I'm not going to put a cooler in the front, and I've ditched the door in the right hand side that covers cables. A brief tour of the hardware inside our PC. We have this Gigabyte RTX 4080 gaming OC. Motherboard is this Gigabyte X670i Aorus Master. The SSD is a Corsair MP600 Core XT, which is under the enormous heatsink on the Gigabyte motherboard. Memory Corsair Vengeance DDR5, and the processor I've gone for an AMD Ryzen 7 7700X, 8 cores, operates at quite a decent clock speed. I haven't yet installed the CPU cooler, and the explanation is that I want to show you the absolute bare minimum of cabling, the stuff you simply cannot avoid. And that means we have to look around the back. We have plenty of cables. They are pretty much under control, but still we have a lot going on. The power supply is this RM1000X shift, which I covered in a previous video. The unusual feature being, as you can see, that the connectors are on the side. So rather than the cables coming out of the front and then going up, they instead do this. It's easier to work with, but it is made even easier if you have this Accessory Pro PSU power cable kit from Corsair. To point out specifically the fan control hardware that comes as part of the case, i.e. not all of this, we have a powered PWM fan hub here, which can work with up to 6 fans. We've got 3 in the front at the moment. Clearly we need at least 1 more at the rear just to balance things. And then we have a lighting node unit here. So the cables for the RGB from the 3 fans come through. You can see them here. The lighting node in turn is connected to this mini brain, which as you can see is a tiny unit compared, for example, to a full-size Corsair Commander Pro. Those are A, large, B, expensive, and C, have many more functions. You can add temperature sensors and all sorts to the Commander Pro. The brain connects to the motherboard over USB, and therefore we have 3 power connections, 1 for the PWM fan hub, 1 for the lighting node, 1 for the brain, 3 SATA power connections down the bottom. Clearly this is a relatively complicated arrangement for a not very difficult problem, i.e. connect up a number of RGB fans with fan control, and that is exactly what Corsair is tackling with iCUE Link. I've installed an H150i RGB slim fan in the rear of the case, and the CPU cooler is this Hydro H150i. That's a 280mm that comes with these non-RGB fans. So I've removed those and installed a pair of QR140 RGBs. However, I have not installed the lighting hardware that comes with the QR140s. So the setup we have around the back is 4 fans connected to the PWM hub, and we now have 6 fans connected to the RGB hub. And the PC's looking like a proper PC. So the next question is, what does iCUE make of it all, and how does the PC look when it's running? We fast forward an hour or two, and the explanation is that when I started up the PC, it misbehaved. iCUE crashed. And I did not expect that. The reason I didn't expect it is because I'd run the motherboard assembly with the processor, memory, SSD, CPU cooler and graphics on the test bench. After all, you don't watch me installing Windows in these things, that'd be very tedious. The guts of the hardware had already run on the bench with iCUE. Putting it in the case and turning it on, that should be a walk in the park, but no. So it seemed likely the RGB hardware in the case was the issue, which was a surprise because this case, despite this ding in the frame, is actually brand new. I've ended up digging around and analysing stuff, and I've come to the conclusion that this is faulty. I don't much know whether it's the little hub that's the problem or the USB cable itself, and neither do I care. So I've removed this unit and I've actually installed the Corsair Commander Pro that I showed you earlier, which is complete overkill for the job in hand. It does, however, illustrate a particular point about iCUE, which I'd meant to make earlier, didn't get round to, which is that I have 6 fans in this case. I have the 3 fans that come with the case, I have the 2 QLs in the roof, and I have the AF120 RGB Slim at the rear. You will note this is not lit, and the reason is that each lighting group, which in turn attaches to one node, requires one type of fan. I've got 3 types of fans. So I've got one group, the 3 fans at the front. I've got a second group, the 2 fans in the roof. I'd require a third group for this 1 fan at the rear. My original intent with the introduction in this video was to show you the existing hardware, then to pull it out and to put in the brand new iCUE Link hardware. The fact that I've actually suffered from a hardware problem with the existing hardware, in a sense, proves the thesis. So it's time to close down this PC, remove the old crusty hardware, and take a look at the shiny new stuff. I've removed all the hardware I don't require. So the Commander Pro that was in this case for but a few minutes, the H115 cooler, the 2 QR140 fans I put on the cooler, that slim fan that was in the rear, the 3 stock fans from the front, and the associated PWM and RGB hardware that go with these fans. And we have a bare bones PC minus any cooling or RGB. And we bring in the iCUE Link H150i RGB all-in-one cooler and this expansion pack of QX120 RGB fans. If you buy this AIO on its own, it's £250. If you buy the AIO with an expansion pack of fans, it's £350. So £100 for these 3 fans with the associated hardware. However, if you buy the fans on their own, a triple pack of these brand new fans, you're looking at £139 here in the UK. Here's the price list that Corsair gave us when iCUE Link launched at Computex. We note, however, the prices have dropped quite significantly since then. Also, various items are out of stock on Corsair's website. And let's take a look at what you get inside the iCUE Link H150i RGB. We have mounting brackets for Intel and for AMD. We have the all-important control unit with these 2 connections which look something like USB Type A, but they're not. Cables various. That's retention for Threadripper. And by the feel of it, what Corsair describes as miscellaneous hardware is a bag of screws so you can install your cooler in your case. Most of that hardware is familiar to anyone who's installed an AIO cooler in the last 5 or 10 years, other than the bag of cables and the control unit. Those are the new bits. And then we have the AIO itself. I note that Corsair has already installed the 3 fans. You don't need to do that. It's a very smart unit. We have metal ends to the hoses with pivots, and the cables you can see feed in and vanish out of sight, so we don't have cables trailing across the pump body. That's a very nice and rather weighty assembly. And of course the thing is, the fans have no cables. We can see how Corsair achieves this incredibly clean design by looking at these 3 QX120 accessory fans. We have a block of 3 fans. They simply pull apart. It takes a bit of a pull because of magnets. We have communication ports and connection points. And it's as simple as that. And we take a cable, we plug in the end. Really neat. So the 3 fans simply require a cable going in at one end and you're good to go. So if we look at this, and then this goes off to the control hub. I think we can safely say, however, the devil's going to lie in the detail of the various cables that have to connect in to these sockets here. This looks incredibly neat and tidy, and the obvious next step is to install this cooler in our 5000D case. Preparation for installation: we switch from Intel to AMD clamps. We install this short cable between the fans and the distribution hub on the end of the radiator. The USB-C port is for an upgrade that Corsair has not yet announced, perhaps an accessory screen for your case. And then the second Corsair port, not sure actually what the name of that Corsair port is, but anyway, that is where this longer cable is going to go, which will then connect to the brain. And then we have the control unit. This is a 6-pin PCI Express connector, but rather than the expected 75 watts, it can feed up to 168 watts to a maximum of 14 devices, 7 on each of the 2 ports on the brain. And then we have the USB connection. Which is USB 2, that goes to the motherboard so the system can link to iCUE. And then we have a tacho. And that will go to a fan header on the motherboard. So that's ready to go, that's ready. We just need to install this assembly in the roof. Worth pointing out, the fans that are installed are in push, so were you to mount your rad in the front, those fans would actually be the wrong way around. You need to, well, I suppose you could leave them like that and flow the air out the front, but most likely you want to flip them. As it is, I'm going to leave the fans as they are, and I'm going to install the assembly in the roof like so. That is looking very neat and tidy. And now for the control unit. You can use double-sided tape if you choose to mount the control unit, or you can rely on the little magnets that are in the unit. We connect some cables and we're ready to start up the PC. I was gratified to see that iCUE recognised the hardware without any difficulty. It performed a firmware update for the control unit and we were in action. I've set the RGB to watercolour spectrum just to check everything's functioning, and now the time has come to add some more fans as the system's looking slightly absurd at the moment. We can also check out the fact that iCUE is reporting temperatures from each of the fans. How on earth does that work? While I've been making this video, I've had a word with Corsair and we have decided that this port, and I suppose the part of the cable, is a Corsair iLink connector, which sounds more like a description than a marketing term, but what the heck. We now have 7 of the new QX120 fans installed, 1 in the rear, 3 on the AIO, 3 in the side. I have another 3 which I want to put in the front, but before I do that, let's take a closer look. The communication system Corsair has developed for iCUE Link is bidirectional, regardless of whether devices are connected together directly, as with these fans, or whether we have a cable between the active ports. To the system, this is all the same thing, and that assembly is then daisy chained off to the control hub. This means that not only can the control unit tell the fan what speed it should spin at and what lighting pattern it should display, in addition it means the fan is able to tell the device, I'm fine, I'm a QX120. Also, it can tell the brain what temperature air it is experiencing. That is a temperature sensor in that vein, and that means we've got multiple intelligent devices throughout the system. This gives Corsair's iCUE far more information to work with than with previous hardware. So with iCUE Link, not only do you get pretty lighting patterns, you also have far better control over the cooling inside your gaming PC. With 10 QX120 fans installed, and don't forget we've also got RGB in the pump body, we have a lot of RGB going on. This, to my eyes, looks impressive, not that I would consider it as my daily driver. However, there was another effect that we saw at Computex, and that was time warp. So let's have a little play with that, shall we? Time warp is really clever. It looks to you as though all the fans are rotating clockwise, but when you think about it, there are 10 fans. In some of the instances, you're looking at the back of the fans. These very clever QX120s have lights on both sides and also on the edges. There's a load going on with the lighting. So you're looking at the front of one fan and the back of another fan, and yet they're all in sync. And the explanation is that I've used the iCUE software to turn some of the fans to appear to rotate clockwise and some to appear to rotate anti-clockwise. And I've gone for a variety of colours just to make it crystal clear what's going on. It's really nifty and I love it to bits. One thing I will say is it's slightly complicated because each of the fans is an individual thing, whereas at Computex, Corsair had used Elgato's Stream Deck to set up the lighting in a simple 3-button setup. One button for static, one button for clockwise, one button for anti-clockwise. I've had to work slightly harder than that, but still, I like it a great deal. In order to make the lighting appear correct on camera, I've had to fiddle with shutter speeds. As you will see, initially the cameras were flickering, and that's because the eye is doing something different to the camera. So there's a little bit of fudging has gone on to make it appear correct to you right now. So here we have the fans going one way. Let's make them appear to go the other way. If that doesn't impress you, then I'm not quite sure what will. From a final trick, let's make the fans appear to be static. Of course I know that Corsair is playing a clever trick on us with this lighting effect. Nonetheless, I'm impressed. Let's take a look at the cabling around the back, because after all, the original iCUE hardware was an issue because of all the mess that it caused. There's no arguing, this new system is so much tidier than the original iCUE. It's worth pointing out the controller can handle up to 14 devices in total, 7 per port. So I've grouped the rear fan and the AIO together on one port and the front fans and the side fans on the other port. This means I've had to link the rear fan to the AIO and the front fans to the side fans. Happily, Corsair is pleased to sell you accessory cables for that very purpose, and we can see here on the price list that you might need to allocate a bit more cash to tidy up your system and pull everything together. We're agreed the finished PC looks absolutely lovely, but might there be scope for improvement? Could we perhaps do something about this rather dull looking Corsair Vengeance DDR5 memory? Happily, the answer is yes we can, because at Computex alongside iCUE Link, Corsair also launched Dominator Titanium, and this has just recently gone on sale, and we have a set of the very finest. The press release for Dominator Titanium tells us about kits that will be 2x16 gigabytes, 2x32 gigabytes, and also 2x24 gigabytes, and speeds of DDR5-6000, 6600, and 7200. However, the tech specs talk about more options, including 4x16 gigabyte, 4x24 gigabyte, and speeds ranging up to DDR5-8000. The specs also tell us that black and white kits support XMP and grey kits support AMD Expo. As you can see, this kit is called by Corsair Dominator Titanium First Edition. First Edition would appear to be reviewer's kit. And inside the box we have a card. Congratulations, welcome to your shiny new memory. And it's signed by Andy Paul, the boss of Corsair. And when we look at Andy's LinkedIn photo, we note a certain dress style and we think, is there another CEO who dresses in a similar fashion who is achieving monumental success? And if you think there might be a common thread here, well, why not try and copy success? It seems like a very good move. piece of black paper, and then we come to the memory kit. So we have two modules. These modules are grey in colour, and that's because this is an Expo kit. In other words, designed for AMD. There are 3 kits out there on review, to the best of our knowledge. We have DDR5-6000, 64 gigabytes, DDR5-6600, 64 gigabytes for Intel, so supports XMP, and DDR5-7200, 32 gigabytes, supports XMP. We told Corsair we'd be working with AMD hardware, so we got the Expo kit. We'll come to these two interesting accessories momentarily. But first let's look at the aesthetics of the memory. If we take this Dominator Platinum RGB, DDR5 rated at 7000, Intel XMP, then that memory goes in like so. And we put in some Dominator Titanium. You will note 005. We understand that this is kit 5 out of 100. Very similar in height. Perhaps a millimetre or two taller, but both sets of memory very tall. The explanation is they have RGB lighting that takes up some space. Also DHX, dual path heat exchange. This memory is intended to run at high speeds and to remain icy cool. There's more to the aesthetics, however, than the heat exchanger. This top can be removed. Our first edition kit comes with this tool, interchangeable tips. We're going to use this tiny little Allen driver. Out it comes. We can see there we have a block connector which goes into the top of the module, and that obviously powers lighting. And we have been supplied with 2 finned tops. So we have what looks like a copper heatsink finned with a piece of thermal compound and a cosmetic shroud which holds it down. These GT fin style accessories are available in black, white or grey. We understand $30 in the US, presumably plus tax, or £40 here in the UK. And considering they look quite nifty, that seems perfectly reasonable. Corsair is keen for modders to create their own parts for this memory, and we saw some of that at Computex. Pricing for the memory kits, the 3 review sets, we've been given £295 for this 64GB 6000 kit, £305 for the 64GB 6600 XMP kit, or £205 for the 32GB 7200 kit. Those prices would seem to be about 10% more than a comparable Dominator Platinum kit, and that seems perfectly reasonable considering you have the fun and games of the interchangeable top. I think the smart move now is to install the RGB memory in our system and see how it looks. It's time for a beauty contest to see what we think of the looks of these different types of RAM, starting with the Vengeance, which of course is understated, and then moving on to the new Dominator Titanium with the alternate GT fin style tops. That looks smart. Next we have Dominator Platinum with RGB, which looks pretty blooming good. And finally the new Dominator Titanium with its RGB lighting powered by iCUE, and that looks absolutely excellent. And that wraps up my showcase of Corsair's iCUE Link. I was impressed by it when I saw it at Computex, and it works well in practice, and that's always good to see because sometimes there are nasty wrinkles tucked away. But nope, what you see is what you get, and I like it. I've got absolutely no doubt we're going to see a torrent of Corsair products over the coming months, probably years, that use iCUE Link, and that will be good to see. And now we've spotted that USB-C port on the AIO cooler, I'm expecting to see LCD screens on the sides of cases. And that will also be a welcome thing. Towards the end there, we segued into a quick look at Corsair's Dominator Titanium RAM, and that is basically a taster for a review that will be coming soon. And now it's time to call an end to the RGB light show.